Welcome to another Coffee with Developers. I'm here with Pablo Ruiz-Muzquiz. Did I do that right? Yes, excellent. He's the CEO of Penpot. What is Penpot?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Chris. So Penpot is an open source design and prototyping tool. And this is not only the first open source design and prototyping tool, but also the first one that understands how important it is to have both designers and developers participating in the design process. It's web-based, real-time collaboration, an infinite canvas where you can basically design UX, UI software, and then also have the code ready for you. And just enjoy software development with new processes, new tools, new ideas with both designers and developers. And this is Penpot.
Cool. That was short and sweet. I like the idea of the working with developers and designers together, because my whole career as a web developer, and I'm always on the coding side, but I came from the graphics side on demo scene stuff and really old computer things.
Okay.
And it has always been a struggle. It's always been okay, the designer does it, and then you get a PSD and you give it to the developer, and they have to do something with it. And developer then picks a color of green that they think is close enough to what the designer was doing. So there was always this wall in between those two worlds.
Yeah.
On the other hand, we then got into the what you see is what you get world, where it's like, oh, you don't need a developer because your designer can do the thing in, I don't know, a front page, and then later on Dreamweaver, and well, every tool actually gives you an export to code. And as a coder, I look at that code and I'm like, oh my God, this is so unoptimized. I can do something better with it. Whereas like as a designer, I look at what developers have done to my code. And they're like, well, this rounded corner looks good enough, and not just like the thing. So how do you think, where is the sweet spot there? Like, what is the problem in that collaboration that was always broken?
I think it has changed over the time. I think initially my background is in science and engineering, so that would be physics and computer science. So that is my bias. But I've always loved design, good design. So I think initially I thought it was a problem in terms of the format exchange. Okay, there's this pain in this loss in translation was because we were using different formats. So the loss in translation was in the format. Then I think we evolved into thinking perhaps it's about the methodology. And then we got into Agile. And we thought, okay, if engineers use Agile, like Scrum, Kanban, or whatever flavor in between, if only designers could adopt Agile, we would iterate, and we'll have this fluid communication. And it's about the process, the methodology, the communication, how we build software. But I think now that we have formats and Agile, we still have the pain. We still suffer the pain. So it has to be something else, something underlying that could not be unearthed, until now. And my gut instinct, and the reason why we built Penpot is to address this pain, of course, is that we are coming from two different paradigms, and tools have not addressed them correctly. And this is design coming from this imperative design paradigm, where it is important to have control over the whole thing. And code comes from a declarative design paradigm, where it's more about the rules, but not exactly how you apply the rules, but the intended result. So I'll give you an example. Declarative design can be road signs. Road signs use a declarative design paradigm. You see a stop sign, and you know that you have to stop. By the time you get to the stop sign, you have to have speed equals 0 by the time you get to that point. But it doesn't tell you how you have to achieve that. This is how the code world works. But design, imperative design, is all about making sure that you have to go in a car, you have to decrease your velocity in a certain point. All the variables, all the context is relevant, not just the end result. So what is happening is that we are now seeing the fact that tools that designers use enforce an imperative design paradigm, and developers live in a declarative design paradigm. By the way, very, very interestingly expressed by CSS and languages like that. So as long as we don't connect both paradigms, we're going to still suffer the pain. So Penpot has decided that we will bring the declarative design paradigm to the design tool. This is our key move. Our key move is to look in the engineering world, what are the rules that actually are expressed in code, which is, by the way, what goes into production, and bring them natively into a design tool that feels native also to designers. And by doing so, we hope to finally have one language, one vocabulary, one mental model. And we should get developers now participating into the design process, getting closer to designers. And by doing so, making sure that designers now hold more power, because everyone knows that when someone comes to your house, to your home, to your place, you have a certain agency, an extra agency. It is your domain. As long as developers do not appreciate or understand the design process, that disconnect will continue to happen. So this is why I would, going back to your question, why do we have this pain? Well, multiple reasons, but as we have addressed them in order, I think we are now facing the inevitable. It is a paradigm problem. And there are tools out there that continue to enforce the wrong paradigm. And they are doing a disservice to designers because they're promising things they cannot do. Now, you also said something very interesting. Sometimes these tools, what they do is just replace the designer, or they replace the developer with a no code, no design approach. We don't believe in that approach. We understand there is value and merit in commoditizing part of the talent, but we think that is very limiting. What you see is what you get, and whatever, or now code to design, it is basically trying to bring you shortcuts to complex production software, and that is not going to happen. It is very nuanced. So we are not in that business. We are not in the business of giving superpowers to the individual. We're in the business of really bringing those teams together and having this multidisciplinary approach where there is no disconnect, where there is no lost in translation. But you have to make decisions when you do that, and they are there in our tool. You cannot avoid them.
One thing where it broke down as well was a lot in, as you said, handover, and also in formats. Like that was the first break, like a PSD that was unnamed layers, like basically, or layer 1, layer 15, layer 16, as a 1.2 gigabyte file going into your GitHub repo was not the way you wanted to collaborate with it. So, but on the other hand, we're creatures of habit. We want to actually work in our environments. We love our Visual Studio Code. We love our Vim. We love our other things. Designers are used to their tools. So how do you get both of these worlds to now go to something in the browser, which like historically has always been like a 40%, 60% of what my other tool does? Like, do you feel like for getting people into using a tool that is browser based rather than the tools that they're already using is the way forward, or is this a way to like have it as plugins in these other two environments and then do the final collaboration in the browser?
Okay, that's a great question. I mean, in a way, a web-based tool right now, if you really want to build real-time collaboration, client server, decoupled architecture, make it very accessible for everyone to just open a browser and get working, it is an inevitable decision. So I think in that sense, it's the right choice. In terms of how do we make a developer start using the browser around design, that is a very specific challenge. That is actually, that's a key challenge. But it's less about the browser being the medium, and it's more about the fact that the developer now uses a design tool. And there are two ways, two ingredients to that, and they are non-negotiable. One, it has to speak the engineer's language. It has to feel like I get this, I understand this. This is not an elite obfuscated language that I need to learn. This is speaking my language. I see Flex layout, I see grid CSS. Even if I'm not building for the web, I understand the concepts behind this declarative design paradigm. There is a very powerful design system feature here. I can use design tokens, which is what I want to use when I'm going. I say Git integration. It's basically an extension of my dev tools. I understand, actually, I use dev tools in a browser. This is like the evolution of such thing, and it's like a proper tool, and it becomes a single source of truth where I can have conversations that are meaningful with my design peers. So I think that is one key ingredient. You have to show developers that there is value in using a tool, but not like they have to evolve themselves into something they are not, but actually just because what they are, they're going to use Penpot. We have that in mind. And that is a challenge, because if you are building a design tool that appeals to developers, you have to think, I cannot alienate designers. It has to be first and foremost a designer's tool. So how do I do that? How do I target and cater to a hybrid audience? We can discuss this on another day, but that is a very specific challenge that we have. We don't take shortcuts. We don't work with one type of audience, one type of one simple kind of ideal user. We have two very distinct that have been trained to think they are different, and they need to remain different. But the second key ingredient for a developer to enjoy Penpot is the fact that it's open source. That is open source, uses open standards, open formats, and they can hack into it as they want. We have the plugins API, we have the regular API, we have the open format, which is basically a zip file with a bunch of JSON files. So it feels very honest to a developer that otherwise would not be fully committed, that would not become fully committed with a new tool to a toolkit, right? For a developer to have in their utility belt such an important tool, it has to be open source. So the language, the paradigm, the way a design tool is expressed has to appeal to developers, and also the nature itself of the tool has to be open source, open standards, interoperable, extensible, etc., etc. And that is what is bringing us 1.5 developers per one designer that does a sign up. What we are seeing at Penpot is that regardless of you're going self-host with Penpot or you go to our SaaS, it is now impossible, virtually impossible for us, just by looking at the intensity of the activity of a user, like just aggregated anonymous data, like number of events, things like that. It is impossible for us to distinguish between a developer or a designer. I'm not saying they're doing the same thing or the same quality, but we cannot tell them apart unless we look into their onboarding survey responses, and then they will self-label as designer or developer. But we cannot distinguish them just because someone is a casual user and someone is a power user. That doesn't work anymore, and we're very proud of that.
That is very good. I mean, I love the idea of allowing people to stay with their craft and actually be like somebody that cares about like the how accessible an HTML element is, not like what it looks like. That's what for me the front end developer always meant. Like, to me, HTML was always a descriptive language, and you write your things in it, and it's just so frustrating to see like divs all over the place rather than somebody using a button. At the same time, what you said was all like very, very engaging for developers, but for designer space, the open source story is not as green or not as successful. When I mean, I've tried for years to get rid of Photoshop and used GIMP. And GIMP is fully open source, but you also see it because it's like buttons move around, menus get changed every version. It was like not a full replacement. So it always felt like in the design space as like open source always felt a bit like developers do some designy things, but I rather do the shiny thing from the closed company out there. So do you feel there is a lot of collaboration coming from that one as well? Is a tool like yours an opportunity for designers to get rid of biases and actually to get into the open source world more as well?
Absolutely. Like in a very pragmatic way, designers get value from Penpot because what they design gets into production. When you don't have this back and forth negotiation about how to reinterpret and translate that, you can fully focus on this. We all want this. Okay, we all want this. We do this. So this is, Penpot would not need to be open source to deliver that. It's just the way the Penpot is built. But it is true that by being open source, developers are more likely to be engaging with Penpot very seriously, and that is in the benefit of the designer. Now, what you said is true. Open source has not been particularly, well known by the quality of the UX UI. One could argue terminal, some software, the UX is perfect for the intended audience, like sometimes it's just a developer. But in terms of the design tools, there was a gap. There was a lot of people don't know that Penpot is open source. You could not tell Penpot is open source if you come from this that history, that legacy of open source design tools. Blender is a great example, by the way, of a very complex and powerful UI that is a leader in 3D modeling and animation. And I thought 20 years ago that perhaps at some point someone would develop the equivalent for Blender for UX UI 15 years ago. It didn't happen. We had to do it. Okay, that's fine. I was not expecting us to be doing this, but it's fine. But we have the best UX UI talent, and we're making sure that it's a very polished, experience. This is how you do not alienate designers. If you go for a design tool to designers and it's buggy, it is not polished, you will lose them. Like, it's just the designer experience is not there. So we're making sure that we deliver the best designer experience. What we hope will happen is that they will start to understand what ownership means, freedom of choice, autonomy, future-proof ownership, really, of their designs, formats. And when they see the developer peers extending Penpot and doing all sort of amazing stuff, they will also appreciate the flexibility of open source. They will see it with their eyes. I don't need to tell them. They, show, don't tell. I think it is very important that Penpot does not try to tell designers this is fundamentally better. Just show them. But I think what will happen too is that more developers will contribute to design in open source. More designers will contribute to open source software through design. Ourselves, we are now getting design contributions. That sounds amazing. Design contributions are also open source contributions. We are used to understand what a source code contribution looks like, but what about a design contribution to a project that's open source? So I think we like to think Penpot is bringing more open source to design, but it's also bringing more design to open source. And this is very exciting for us because this is new. And I'm not saying designing a logo. I'm saying a contribution that actually fundamentally changes some interaction between the product and the user. And that is encapsulated in an artifact that people can communicate, that can engage with, and that gets into code. And
it's also a contribution thing, isn't it? I mean, in the design world, spec work is basically a very dirty term. Like, nobody does anything for free because we've always said, like, we give you some way of reaching out. We tell people about you, like we give you coverage. Like, I can't go to the supermarket and buy coffee with coverage. That basically is not a thing that happens. So getting designers to contribute and put extra time in without actually being paid for it was always a tricky bit. I mean, I worked for Mozilla, I had the same thing. We had like people giving us themes and these kind of things, but UX reviews and these kind of things, you always had to put money behind. Yeah. Which brings me to the money part, because it's great to say, like, we're open source and everything, but people need to get paid. People need to get working for the company. Like you said, you can host Penpot completely yourself, and there's also a SaaS service. So yeah. I guess your money comes from the SaaS business, or?
I was actually attending an online design event early this morning, and it was all about, it was in French event, and they were discussing the market, how the market is evolving for a designer. Okay. And it was very interesting, but you could feel the tension, you could feel the fear. And people were asking what my new job title should be and things like that. Okay, how do I build my portfolio? This uncertainty with their job, opportunities. I think it's something engineers don't have as much. I think there is the working for free, and open source is a great example. Is a privilege that rich people and previous people can do, and this is why we see open source being born in Europe and the US, right? And in particular, engineers. So I think designers, for them to consider to be working for free, like open source contributions, I think there is an issue there with how comfortable they are giving away something that is already problematic in their working conditions. So that is something, some food of thought there to understand the different perspectives, I think, between engineers and designers. But now, how are we making money? Right now, it is very simple. There's an enterprise tier. You can go self-host or SaaS, and you pay subscription to get extra support. This is something tactical that we are doing, and we're very honest about this. In the meantime, we are building what we call the open nitrate model. The open nitrate model is a new business model around open source that we are experimenting with. So you will know if it succeeds, which is not entirely opposite to open core, but quite. And basically the rationale behind this, and we hope to have it ready towards the end of the year. So you won't find it right now on our pricing page. You will find links and resources where we explain all this. But in a nutshell, the open nitrate model is a model by which you build Penpot as open source 100%. The most advanced product, the most wonderful imagination that we have for the product is always open source. That is the best expression of our mission. It is open source. And then we have a separate back office whose only reason to exist is to configure and limit and determine how exactly that experience is going to work for an organization. Okay. And that you pay for. That is a proprietary product. It's not open source. And it's meant for organizations that need to govern how the organizations are using Penpot. So I'll give you an example. When we think about the plugin architecture, we think, what is the best API that we can give users? Well, this is the best API. We can iterate. We don't need to do everything first version. That is fine. But we always think we need to get the best developer experience, 100% freedom. You can explore whatever you want. But through the back office, you might want to limit what exactly that API for plugins will look like for your organization. Actually, you can go further and say only these plugins will be officially supported or available for my organization. Only these 3. I don't want users to freely decide which plugins they're going to use. Okay, because for whatever reason, security perhaps, productivity, cultural, methodology, I don't care. I'm not going to judge why. But enforcing rules, restricting the default freedom that Penpot gives teams and individuals means you pay for that. And this means that it's actually simpler to build a product because you don't need to, like mentally or in team, decide, okay, like open core. This open source gives us to the certain point of feature, and then there is a paywall for the advanced version of that feature, right? This is almost the opposite. You get the advanced version of the feature by default, and you pay to restrict it. And organizations get value from it. That is what they want. We have done our market research. And for a collaboration productivity suite that deals with critical IP, such as design in software development, this is what they want. And this gives us a zero conflict of interest with our community because they always know that the best product is the open source product. And they always know that if someone has to pay, it's to limit the freedom of the people. In that sense, it's actually quite elegant, the model. And we don't need to develop 2 versions of the feature, one that is okay, good enough, and then the advanced. We always develop the advanced, and then the counterpart, if it exists, is the means to control it.
That is amazing. Because I remember I worked, God, a long time ago, because I'm old and spent. I worked in enterprise content management systems, Tridion, Documentum, like the ones with like
Okay,
five
okay,
figures,
big names here.
five figures installations, and all of them were very restrictive in what the content maintainers can do. And
Yeah,
I like that. I built visitbritain.com back then with that. So basically, I did a fully accessible website with proper CSS back then, almost unknown. And basically, headlines looked the right way. They only could put like headings in the right structure, and everything worked fine. There was an XSLT that actually was there to a
yeah.
schema to actually validate everything, and it was wonderful. And then, of course, somebody found that there is a what you see is what you get editor also in that CMS and turned that one on. And we had garbage in the database in terms of like text that cannot be, is not accessible and cannot be changed. So even in those very expensive things, it was always the like, okay, give people all the freedom to shoot themselves in the foot, and then we can charge more when they have to fix it later on. So the idea of releasing the whole product and then limiting it is a very clever one, because every other open source project that I worked on sooner or later became a victim of its own and of its own extension model. Like
Yeah.
browsers are slow because people have 5 different ad blockers running at the same time and wonder why these competing things for rendering the page might slow down their computer. Or they use a YouTube downloader that illegally downloads YouTube videos for them and calls in the background and mines bitcoins or whatever because they got it from some dodgy website. Or I mean, the amount of times I saw WordPress being hacked was basically some random plugin that wasn't going through a security review, but basically felt like, oh, that's the right thing to do. And I mean, sometimes it was just galleries or these kind of things. So the idea of being able to roll out something open and completely accessible, but in a limited fashion, feels to me like when we went from the open web to marketplaces to download apps, which I gave a TED talk about that I found was the worst experience and the dumbest idea in software distribution ever, because it took the freedom of choice away from the end user and put it on companies. You
Yeah.
cannot take a website away from people. It will be cached, it will be downloaded, it will be available for forever. But you can take an app from a store, so people can't download it anymore. So we went back to burning virtual DVDs or virtual CDs that could get scratched. We made software a thing that can actually get out of date again. But so this felt like that as well, but it didn't deliver. Not a single on one of these app stores that I know has more secure environments than the web. If anything, it's full of malware that just takes 8 years to
Yeah,
find,
yeah. No,
whereas on the web, it's much easier to fix.
no,
So this is a very interesting approach. Like you said, you did your user research, your market research. Like who were the customers that basically asked for that kind of feature? And let me validate an assumption. They were not American, right?
no, they were. No,
They
no, no,
were.
no. It is what surprised us is that organizations that want to control the design process, the software process, they want to decide who gets to change the single source of truth that a design system might be, how an onboarding process looks like when you have a new employee, to which project is mandatory that this person, arrives to, like the official plugin, like the curated whitelist plugin list, all that has been completely validated irrespective of the geography. What is not, let's say, there's what it does bring a sharing thread is the type of organization. Okay, typically medium to big to huge, where they need to enforce control, they need to govern people. Complete freedom is not a good thing. I understand that. I'm just saying, if you need to redefine how the default experience, the laissez-faire experience of Penpot looks like, you have to pay, and you have to pay a lot. And when we have expressed this, they say it makes total sense for us. And when we have gone to FOSDEM, I don't know, Ubuntu Summit, you name it, all the open source. And because people are concerned, developers are concerned about, okay, I will onboard Penpot, but then I don't want this moment of treason to surprise me. Tell me, how are you going to monetize this? How are you going to be sustainable? Because I do care about Penpot, so I need it to be sustainable, but in a way that I'm comfortable with. We said, look, if you go open source, you can do everything. The best experience is the open source. We'll make sure of that. If your employer wants to restrict your freedoms, they will pay. And that is fine. That is what they want. So no, US, Europe, South America, Africa, Asia, anyone that deals with, let's say, more than 50 designers and developers is happy about that. And they're willing to pay a lot because they extract a lot of value of government. I'm not saying this is a good idea for every open source product. I think this is a niche category we're in. Open source, design, collaboration, productivity aspect, developers, designers, decision making going on, things like that. And I think it will shine. And this is, we call it nitrate because it comes from saying no to 3 things. Okay, so, and no 3 times is NO3, and NO3 is nitrate. But also I like it because nitrate is a fertilizer, and it's what actually makes plants grow. So I like it in terms of growing your product and growing your business. So this is why we like the idea of calling it open nitrate.
I think it's also the benefit, as you said, it doesn't work for every product, but if you have,
I don't think so.
Feature product like yours, then it's a good thing. I mean, VLC could not say only play every 5th video that you put in there or something like that, or like don't only show subtitles when they're not downloaded from some dodgy website, because that was a security issue that they had at one time. But it's fascinating to see that. So in terms of the structure of the company, like where are your people based? And as an open source project, which is always a validation of the open source idea, how much of the collaboration or how much of the contributions come from the outside?
Great. So we mostly live in Spain because the company originated in Spain, Kaleidos. That's a company. In 2011, we created this company called Kaleidos Open Source. There you have it in the name. And we were a services company, a quite elite type of developer company that would pick their clients based on if it was exciting and it was, good impact for society, what we're building. And at some point we started building our own tools for ourselves. The first one was Taiga, which is an open source project management tool. And eventually we developed Penpot. It was not named Penpot at the time. And then we fully transitioned to a product company. Okay, so we since we started in Madrid, in Spain, that's why you will see that we have a lot of people in Spain, but we are now mostly in Europe in general. So that's the structure of the company. We like to think we don't need to hire everyone in the world. We have this open source ethos of collaboration. So for instance, the latest and greatest feature that we released in 2.7, native design tokens, was built in collaboration with Token Studio, another open source company that did this plugin for Figma, and now has helped us develop natively designed tokens in Penpot. So that is fine. That is the type of collaboration that we want. And then we have collaborations from all over the world. In terms of percentage-wise, wouldn't be able to tell. I would probably say 10%. So that's not a lot. But this is a very complex product. And on top of being a very complex product, we use a very opinionated framework and language. We use Clojure, a functional programming language. You didn't know that. This was not staged. I can assure. Exactly. So
it's a blast from the past, isn't it? Like to a degree.
It works. It works for us. Both the backend and the front end is Clojure. Penpot is, let's say I wouldn't say top 1 because it would be a bit become a bit egotistical here or narcissist or whatever, but it is in the top 2 Clojure repositories in the world. Like if you really want to showcase Clojure's potential, you show Penpot. At the same time, we are migrating part of the rendering engine from a fully DOM SVG rendering model that uses and leverages browsers to Canvas, WebAssembly, and Rust. Because, as you might know this, Chris, unfortunately, the browsers that we have not evolved as much as we would like to support the level of performance that we need for a tool like Penpot. So people have to understand that Penpot should be able to render dozens of thousands of buttons, I don't care, whatever design element, at ease. And if you go fully DOM and SVG, you get a lot of issues also with SVG. SVG is an imperative design paradigm, by the way. It's not declarative. It is the rendering thing. So we couldn't care less, okay, because it's just the rendering. But it has its issues. But it is the DOM performance that is an issue with us. So I said 3 years ago, this is the way. We fully support open standards, DOM, super web honest. But we are getting to a point where performance is an issue. So we are rewriting, we are refactoring the whole rendering engine. And that will allow a lot of more contributors. I'm sure about this. If you go Canvas, WebAssembly, and Rust, we will get more contributors. But yeah, sometimes they're between 5%, 10%, all over the world, design contributions included, come from outside the team.
But it's not surprising. I mean, when I worked on Chromium developer tools, there were hardly any outside contributions that were not Microsoft or Google, because everybody thought, like, those are big companies, they pay a lot of money, why should I give my free time for that kind of thing? Or people thought, I'm not good enough, I'm not going to send the code in. The Google or Microsoft engineers will not take my pull requests anyways. So there's this, I think it's a dirty secret of open source that after a certain size, it's really hard to get contributors from the outside. It's easy to hire them once they actually started hit the ground running, but it's actually harder to get people to contribute from the outside because of the reasons that I just mentioned. The rendering thing, definitely. I mean, Google Sheets is now using WebAssembly and actually Canvas rendering as well, because I didn't know that finance people like millions of lines of rows of things to scroll really fast, but they needed to. And it's SVG. I remember when in Firefox back then, we were the first ones to allow inline SVG inside XHTML, because it's basically XML inside HTML, and it's supposed to be its own document and its own DOM as well. So the mixing those two is, of course, slowing everything else down as well. And it was interesting because SVG was kind of dead. And then mobile came around, and out of a sudden, like, oh, scaling things without losing quality and Flash was not there anymore is a good idea. So we're mixing like 3 different DOMs, and it's no wonder that it's actually slow. Canvas, on the other hand, I was always super excited about, but especially as it's always giving me the image also as a pixel array that I can sort and I can clear out. I mean, I did like 3D animation star fields, and instead of calculating the distance, I just sorted the array, and the computer did it for me. But it's pixel-based, which makes no sense in most designs that we have these days. So that's a tricky bit to convert from the other. And also the limitations of the API in Canvas is sometimes interesting when you have like X, Y, and then width and height rather than X, Y, and X2 and Y2. So converting from one to the other is sometimes a tricky bit. But this is a really interesting thing to see, like what that would do to contribution numbers going from one environment to another.
And we have the plugins. I mean, a lot of people, we have this very strong principle that we want to, in order to get developers and designers, like really to have Penpot be successful, we have to go declarative design. I just express that. Open source, you have full control. You can self-host, extend it, hack it. Some people even fork Penpot. We're using MPL 2.0, so it's relatively friendly to forks as long as you separate your files. But then we don't want to build every feature ourselves. We want to get to a point where we are, in a way, a bit of a framework too. So a lot of contributions that would normally have to be a feature can become a plugin. And there it's just whatever runs on a browser will run. I mean, just JavaScript or whatever runs on a browser will work. And then we see a lot of contributions there. See, so people are excited about building their own thing, their own extension. And it's very visual and it's very shiny, and it's very appealing to people to very quickly show something visual in a design tool. So if we count plugin contributions, then that is massive, and it's growing every single day. But I think the rendering engine change will allow for more people to contribute to the core. But all the documentation is open. We want this tool to be accessible. We don't want this tool to be only for the senior people, for the elite. We want everyone to enjoy, also to contribute very easily. And we are sharing the whole thing. You can look at our Taiga project and you can see the backlog, you can see the current sprint, you can see the user stories, the tasks, who's assigned to what. And we share a roadmap, this story about the rendering going from DOM SVG to Canvas WebAssembly Rust. It is fully public. We just open it. We share all this journey. We'll give in talks, whether it's our Penpot Fest or wherever we are invited to. We want to share all, how the sausage is made in a way. And so I think this is a topic that we here at WeAreDevelopers, I think people will enjoy. Like, how are you doing the whole refactor of something as critical as a rendering engine for a design tool? So happy to discuss that in the future.
Let's talk about the fears of developers, and let's end with a thing that you probably get asked every single time somebody talks about that right now. AI and generative images and things being created for you and automatically detecting from a design. I was so screaming at my screen when the whole ChatGPT thing came, where somebody scribbled a thing and then it created a code for him. And I'm like, we stopped that workflow 20 years ago from like getting a design sent to the developer and creating code from it. Like we think in components, we think in resizable things, we think in reflows. And but yeah, people will probably ask you right now, what's your AI story, and what is your AI story, and what is your thoughts on it in the design space?
I'll start by saying that there is a lot of incentive. I always like to think in terms of the system of incentives, right? There's a lot of incentives to put money into a B2C market around Gen AI. There's a lot of, like the big VCs with a lot of money, they are looking at, they're targeting B2C. And that means that you will get a lot of experiments that are easily, how do you explain this? Like, people can think they know about, like they can discuss, because they're reaching like the super end user that is not even knowledgeable about the matter. So this is bringing a lot of noise to the signal ratio. Having said that, our story, we have evidence and opinion that tells us that there's no way generative AI, whether it's diffusion models or LLMs, can tackle UX UI design. And we always think perhaps we are too old to see it. I mean, you have sometimes you have to be aware of your bias. Like, I don't want it to happen. Like, I really would like to think they are all wrong and I'm right. But no, seriously, we have evidence to support that an interactive software design concept, something that is kind of a living creature, holds a lot of meaning and intention and symbolic meaning and language in just something that is visual, okay? And there is a lot of things that your brain is doing for you. Your brain is deciding that these two elements that share a color are related, okay? You are looking at hierarchies and intuitively thinking, okay, it is fashionable these days to think that if something is flat and has this shape, it is a button, okay? You are kind of overcompensating the massive amount of ambiguity that there is in a UX UI design. And at the same time, this artifact that has this visual rendering nature has to have a code rendering that is also polished, readily structured, reusable, sustainable in the future. So you have this dual nature object that is neither entirely visual, neither entirely nor entirely code, but has to be both at the same time in order to be worthwhile. So I like to, since my background is in physics, one of my academic careers is to think of a photon, like a photon. People, knowledgeable know that a photon in order to understand the photon, you have to understand there's both a wave and a particle. You cannot understand a photon by only looking at it as a wave. Oh, there's an interference here. It is a wave. Oh, but actually it is exciting electrons when they hit, so it has to be a particle or whatever. So I think a UI design, it is kind of a photon. There is no way generative AI can understand that. So there's an evidence here, like it's fundamentally there's a fundamental limitation of generative AI. So when we look at our story, I think that's a waste of our time. It is a waste of our time to try and make something that it was not meant to sort out this domain, try to make it. Instead, what we can do is good old machine learning work that works great when you have a small task, a small domain, and a very predictable output. And you can insert that naturally into the product. I'll give you an example. If you are designing a button, and Penpot should be able to kind of classify real time what you're doing and think, you know what, I think that looks very close to two of your design components that are buttons. Do you want to autocomplete that design yourself by selecting one of these two? And this is a micro interaction that is very context aware, and it's not about brainstorming ideas or no, it's just about this tiny task. You're in the flow, you're in the zone, and you can say, actually, thank you, button number 3, and you go on. Okay, does not disrupt your flow. But you can also say, no, actually not. It's not one of those buttons in my design system. And then Penpot can say, okay, do you want to create a new component out of this button? Because it could be reused in the future. That is one example. And design systems has a lot of examples. Like you can refactor the design system to make it more compact, because there are ways to identify redundancy, things like that. Okay. So our AI story is less about Gen AI, less about producing massive amounts of waste, basically, that then you need to polish, and then there's waste in that process, and more about the kind of the exoskeleton metaphor, where we give you speed to whatever you want to do, but you keep being the sort of accuracy, right? You know what you want to do, you just want to do it fast, instead of the magical wand where you try to prompt and say what you want and hope that this genie of the lamp will give you what you want. And then it's all about engineering the wish, which we all know that doesn't work in stories. Like the more you try to engineer the wish, the genie, is more likely to actually turn it in against you. So whatever we end up building, and we are building stuff, is going to be open source, open standards, opt-in, and everyone is going to, whether they like it or not, understand why it's there and why it's meaningful. But we're not going to take away your agency, because we now are connecting your tool to an API that does this black box thing and return with something that then you need to reinterpret. And then we're back to square one. So yeah, this is how we see it. We think a lot of people are wasting a lot of time. And we're seeing now some signs, particularly from the designer industry, trying to explain why. And I think they are still not, some of them are very, they express it in very interesting terms, but they are off the mark because perhaps they haven't understood the paradigm dilemma that we still using tools that go declarative, imperative, the training data set that you have out there, it is production code. Do you really want to train design process with production code? Is that what you want? I don't think you want that. So it is a mess. It is a mess. Fundamentally, it is a mess.
And it breaks the whole concept of like making people relearn things is so much harder than making people learn things in the first place. Like when you work in a certain fashion, as you said before, you have your development environment set up the way you want to, and you go somewhere else. I need an incentive to do that. I really need something I need a carrot on a stick that actually gets me there, rather than like I just need to be told, oh, that's much better, you should be using it. So this is a wonderful insight. Are you coming to the Congress, to the WeAreDevelopers Congress in Berlin?
Of course, we're coming.
Excellent.
Many of us are coming.
I got lots of people to talk to with you, because there seems to be a meshing of ideas. A lot of people that work in that space for quite some while in the tooling space are not worried about the AI, Gen AI thing, because we know how people tick and we know what good products need. And I think that's where like vibe code away if you want to. I really don't care, because it's not going to be eating into the market that I have when somebody wants something that actually works. So it's going to be very interesting to talk about more of those things, and it's going to be fun.
Absolutely. But going back to my first remark, which was unrelated to your question, I'm sorry, but this I think is relevant. People are seeing this hype around Gen AI, design, code, and all that. And they say, why all this hype? And I have to share with the audience here, the hype is a symptom of the massive amount of money that is being poured into this. And why is that? Why so much money? And particularly in the US is because they think they're just coming to a recession. And B2C kind of negotiates and circumvents that recession, because that hasn't had to deal with layoffs in big organizations. B2C kind of is a nice shortcut. But also because of one very distinct element of Gen AI. It is a matter of brute forcing it. It has been proven that if you spend ridiculous amount of money, some emerging property arises. And this is something that the big VCs feel excited about. Like, they have a competitive advantage. If this is a matter of massive amounts of money, I have massive amounts of money, perhaps I will get to the next level of brute forcing an emerging property. It is impossible to stop this. The more money you have, the more money you want to spend, because perhaps you are the one that is going to get to the next level. Gen AI was an exercise of brute forcing it. People say it's not going to work. Well, it looks like if you get, not for this niche that we're discussing here, okay, but for all of things, it was a matter of brute forcing it. Massive training data set, massive amounts of GPU power, massive amount of power resources, and something happened. It was like, wow. What if we continue to do so? And this is the problem. The hype is not going to go away, because there's no reason or incentive for that to go away, because who is pouring massive amounts of money? So I think it's important that we remain calm, like we remain chill. We have thoughtful conversations. We understand where we are biased, because perhaps we don't want this, and it's okay. We don't care about what you want. It is going to happen. But also where there's no evidence that, it's like trying to use a technology that was not meant to solve everything, and really trying to solve everything with that technology. But the hype is not going to go away. So just be ready for at least a couple of years of just this hype going up until it is a disaster, or until someone proves that because of all that money, because all that massive amount of money, like really almost GDP level money, something is discovered. And it's like, wow. No, I'm not saying general artificial intelligence, but something that is a next level. This is the excitement and the promise and the sexiness for VCs. There could be something else if we keep sending money, but that is fueling this hype as a collateral effect.
Well, I mean, fueling on the hype, we got about an hour, which we normally wouldn't want to do, but this was too much fun.
I'm so sorry, Chris. I know.
No, we could go on for hours, and we should do more, because this is really, really good. and there is so much happiness. I also, as you said, like, yes, there's money being thrown in it. It's a hype, but at the same time, hey, if it makes some people feel creative and they get a good feeling out of it, fine. If we can automate 90% of the annoyance away with it and can actually focus on the 10% of doing something good and building a tool like yours that actually is not against the user or trying to replace one part of user with another part of user, that's also great. That's a freedom we get by optimizing things away and by automating things away. And I think there's so much in there. And but I want to thank you for today. This was good. We're going to publish this really soon, and then yeah, we're going to see each other. And one of the live days where one of your colleagues is going to show the product, and then we're going to be at the Congress in Berlin and try to find some good stuff. And I'm going to bring you some nice food from Berlin, from my part where I live.
Thank you. I think 10 or 15 of us are coming to Berlin. We will have a nice booth, and we will do workshops and demos and a lot of nice merch. So yeah, I mean, this is I think apart from Penpot Fest, probably the biggest event this year for us. So no, we are all in with WeAreDevelopers Berlin.
Cool.
So everyone, let's meet in Berlin this year.
Thank you very much. This was Pablo Ruiz-Muzquiz. I'm Chris Heilmann. This is the end of this Coffee with Developers, and we'll see you soon online, and we'll see you in Berlin, and we'll see you at the live show. This was great. Finish your coffee. That was the Coffee with Developers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.